Liam smiled as he pulled into the driveway. Dust swirled around the old Victorian house, catching the afternoon sun. It had been years since he'd been back in his hometown, drawn back by a longing for familiar faces and the comfort of family. The city, with its steel and glass canyons, had lost its appeal. Liam craved the quiet rustling of leaves and the warmth of a close-knit community. He'd found this house tucked away on the outskirts of town, forgotten and left to decay. It was a steal, a chance to build a new life within the bones of the old. Liam had always been handy, and the challenge of restoring the house to its former glory excited him. He envisioned warm, inviting rooms filled with laughter and the aroma of his mother's famous apple pie. The house was a blank canvas, and he the artist. The air was thick with the scent of mildew as he stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced the grime-covered windows. It was a daunting task, no doubt, but Liam felt a surge of anticipation. He would tear down the rotting wallpaper, refinish the hardwood floors hidden beneath layers of grime, and open up the choked fireplace. This wasn't just a house, it was a promise of a fresh start. His fingers itched to begin to feel the rough wood and the satisfying heft of a hammer in his hand. He envisioned the gleam of restored furniture, the soft glow of antique lamps, and the vibrant colours of his mother's prized rose bushes blooming beneath the living room windows. Yes, this house held the promise of a new beginning, a chance to reconnect with his roots and build a future filled with warmth and love. The next morning, Liam set to work. Armed with a crowbar and a bucket of soapy water, he tore into the peeling wallpaper in the entryway. The paper came down in strips, revealing faded floral patterns that hinted at the house's former elegance. Beneath the layers of grime and neglect, he could sense the house sighing, awakening from a long sleep. Days bled into weeks as Liam threw himself into the renovation. He stripped away years of neglect, revealing the sturdy bones of the old house. The sound of his hammer echoed through the empty rooms as he replaced rotted floorboards and reinforced sagging beams. Each swing of the hammer, each cloud of sawdust, brought him closer to his vision. He discovered a fireplace hidden behind a wall of drywall, its brick facade blackened with soot but still intact. With careful hands, he cleaned away the debris, imagining the crackling fires that once warmed the room. He found antique light fixtures in the attic, their glass cloudy with age, but their intricate designs still visible. Each piece he salvaged, each detail he restored, brought him closer to the heart of the house. The more he worked, the more he felt a connection to the past. He imagined the families that had called this house home, their laughter and tears echoing within its walls. He pictured children playing on the grand staircase, their tiny hands gripping the polished banister. He envisioned holiday gatherings, the dining room table laden with food and the air filled with the murmur of conversation. It was as if the house itself was whispering its stories, sharing its secrets with the one person who cared enough to listen. Liam never put much stock in ghost stories. He was a man of logic, of tangible evidence. The strange noises he sometimes heard, the creaking floorboards, the rustling in the walls, were easily explained away as the sounds of an old house settling. The cold drafts that occasionally sent shivers down his spine were simply evidence of leaky windows and drafty doorways. He scoffed at his mother's warnings about disturbing the spirits that surely resided within the old house. Ghosts are figments of an overactive imagination, Mom, he chuckled, giving her a reassuring hug. It's just an old house, and I'm bringing it back to life. But as the weeks passed, Liam found himself questioning his skepticism. It started with small things, tools misplaced, only to reappear in odd locations, the feeling of being watched even when he was alone in the house. He'd brush it off, attributing it to fatigue or the tricks that shadows played in the dim light. Then came the symbols. He uncovered them while stripping the wallpaper in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Scratched into the plaster, beneath were crude, unsettling markings. They weren't random doodles, there was a deliberate hand at work here, a pattern that made his skin crawl. Liam tried to rationalize them away, telling himself they were just the work of bored children who had lived in the house years ago. But deep down, a seed of unease began to take root in his gut. The symbols gnawed at Liam's peace of mind. He tried to ignore them, to focus on the task at hand. He told himself they were nothing more than childish pranks, vestiges of a bygone era. But their presence lingered in the back of his mind, casting a pall over his once enthusiastic endeavor. He found more symbols as the days passed. They appeared in different rooms, etched into the wood beneath windowsills, carved into the brick of the fireplace. The more he uncovered, the more intricate and disturbing they became. They weren't the random scribblings of children. These were deliberate markings, imbued with an unsettling intent. Liam found himself drawn to books on folklore and the occult, topics he'd once dismissed as utter nonsense. He devoured tales of haunted houses, of ancient rituals and malevolent entities trapped between worlds. The rational part of his mind scoffed at the stories, but a primal fear began to stir within him. The scratch marks were even more unnerving. They appeared on the walls and floors, deep gouges that spoke of something frantic, desperate. They weren't the marks of rodents or insects. These were made by something far larger, something with claws. Liam tried to convince himself that it was the work of raccoons or stray animals that had found their way into the house before he'd boarded it up. But the size and ferocity of the marks belied any rational explanation. "You look like hell, Liam." Liam looked up from the floorboards he was sanding, a cloud of dust swirling around him. Cavan stood in the doorway, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a wide grin on his face. "Cavan?" Liam exclaimed, genuine surprise replacing his weary frown. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in the Bahamas living the dream." Cavan chuckled, stepping into the room. "The dream got old, my friend. Besides, I heard you were single-handedly resurrecting the Addams family mansion. Couldn't miss out on the fun." Cavan's arrival was a welcome distraction. They'd been close friends in high school, but life had taken them down different paths. Seeing Cavan's familiar face brought back a flood of memories of carefree days and shared dreams. Liam had told him about the house, about his plans to restore it to its former glory. Cavan, never one to shy away from a challenge, had jumped at the chance to help. With Cavan's help, the renovation took on a new energy. They worked side by side, their banter and laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Cavan, unlike Liam, was a firm believer in the paranormal. He listened with wide-eyed fascination as Liam recounted the strange occurrences, the symbols, the scratch marks. "This place is a goldmine, man," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We might be living on top of a real-life horror movie." The strange occurrences intensified with Cavan's arrival. Objects went missing, only to reappear in impossible locations. Tools vanished from locked toolboxes, and Liam could have sworn he heard the faint strains of music coming from the dusty old piano in the parlor, even though no one had touched its keys in decades. One evening, while making dinner in the makeshift kitchen he'd set up in the dining room, Liam heard Cavan call his name. The voice was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. He rushed upstairs, his heart pounding, only to find Cavan sound asleep in the guest room. "Must have been the wind," Cavan mumbled when Liam woke him, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The voice he'd heard hadn't come from the guest room, it had come from the attic, a place they hadn't even begun to touch. Sleep offered little respite. Liam was plagued by vivid nightmares filled with shadowy figures and whispers in the dark. He'd wake in a cold sweat, the feeling of unseen eyes watching him lingering long after he'd opened his eyes. He couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent had taken up residence within the walls of the old house, something that was growing stronger with each passing day. The air grew heavy, oppressive, as if the house itself was holding its breath. A palpable sense of dread settled over Liam. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were treading on dangerous ground, that they had awakened something best left undisturbed. But what choice did they have now? They were in too deep to turn back. They discovered the hidden room by accident. Cavan was in the basement clearing away debris when his crowbar struck something solid beneath the dirt floor. They dug for hours, their excitement growing with each shovelful of earth removed. Finally, they unearthed a trapdoor, its heavy oak planks rotten with age. The air grew noticeably colder as they pried open the trapdoor, a damp, musty odor wafting up from the darkness below. Liam grabbed a flashlight and peered into the opening, his heart pounding in his chest. A set of rickety wooden stairs led down into the darkness. "What do you think is down there?" Cavan whispered, his voice edged with both fear and excitement. Liam shook his head, his mouth suddenly dry. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." They descended the stairs cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic and cloying. The room at the bottom of the stairs was small, its stone walls damp and discolored. Chains hung from the walls, their iron links rusted and coated in cobwebs. Shreds of what looked like clothing lay scattered on the floor, along with strange symbols drawn in what appeared to be dried blood. A chill ran down Liam's spine as he shone his flashlight on a small steel door set into the far wall. It looked old, ancient, and impossibly out of place in the rough-hewn stone. "What the hell is this?" Cavan breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Liam shook his head, unable to speak. He ran his fingers over the cold, smooth surface of the steel door. It was devoid of any markings, any hinges or handles. It was as if it had been seamlessly grafted into the stone wall. "We should get out of here," Liam said, his voice tight with apprehension. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. But Cavan was already kneeling in front of the steel door, his fingers tracing the thin line where the metal met the stone. "There's something here," Cavan muttered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "I can feel it." Before Liam could stop him, Cavan pressed his palm against the center of the door. The metal groaned, a low, guttural sound that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the house. A thin crack appeared in the center of the door, widening as they watched in horrified fascination. Blinding light spilled out from the widening fissure, illuminating the room with an otherworldly glow. Cavan gasped, stumbling back from the door as if he'd been struck. He clutched at his chest, his eyes wide with terror. "Liam!" he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "Run!" But it was too late. A figure emerged from the blinding light, its form shifting and contorting as it stepped into the room. Liam watched in horror as it solidified, taking on a horrifyingly familiar shape. It was Cavan, or at least a grotesque mockery of him. It wore Cavan's face, his clothes, but its eyes burned with a cold, malevolent intelligence that made Liam's blood run cold. Cavan, or whatever had taken his place, grinned, a chillingly familiar smile spreading across its stolen features. "Hello, Liam," it rasped, its voice a grotesque parody of Cavan's easygoing tone. "Missed me?" Liam didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, scrambling back up the rickety stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the creature's laughter echoing behind him, a sound that chilled him to the bone. It was toying with him, savoring his terror. He burst through the trapdoor and into the relative safety of the basement, slamming it shut behind him. He could hear the creature slamming against the wood, its rage echoing through the confined space. Liam didn't stop. He didn't look back. He ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for respite. He burst out of the house and into the night, the cool air stinging his lungs. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of his car, fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He could still hear the creature's laughter echoing in his ears, a haunting reminder of the horror he'd witnessed. Liam never returned to the house. He left town the next day, abandoning all his belongings, his dreams of a fresh start shattered. The experience left an indelible mark on his soul, a chilling reminder that some things are best left undisturbed. He often wondered what became of Cavan, if some part of his friend was still trapped within that grotesque mockery, its eyes staring out from behind a stolen face. The thought haunted his dreams, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the ordinary, waiting for the unwary to stumble too close. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the house wasn't finished with them. It was out there waiting, and one day it would come for them again.